All right, everybody, my name's Beth Blumenstein, and I'm going to be walking you through the class roster collection for this year. If you have any questions, feel free to type them into the chat. I will have some question breaks throughout the training so I can stop and see what people have typed in, but I might get distracted by your chats and just answer your question right away. So we're going to go ahead and start. So for today's training, we're going to go over basically what we do every year. We're going to talk about some general information, who and what to submit for this collection, some complex situations that I like to address every year just because they are difficult. Then we're going to go over the different data elements, the submission process, how to correct your data. We're going to briefly cover audits, and then last I'll show you all the resources that you can access. So if you have questions, you'll be able to find the answer. Okay, so starting with general information. First, we're going to cover the dates. So the collection opens next Thursday, May 10th, and closes on Monday, July 2nd. And then there's the audit review period from July 12th through July 20th. So between July 2nd and July 12th, I should say between July 3rd and July 12th, you're not going to be able to access your data because that's the time we're going to be processing those audits. And then there is also the class size validation, which runs from July 12th through September 14th. And it's very important to log into the validation or have someone at your district log into the validation during that time. That's kind of how we roll up all the data you give us into what's going to be reported on the report card. So make sure you get a chance to look at that. The last day to make any changes to your data will be September 14th, and we will not be accepting any changes after that. I know that seems kind of late, but often what happens is people leave for the summer, they come back, and first thing in the school year, they realize there needs to be changes to their collection. So just if you're going to be gone for the summer and you're coming back in September, put this in your notes as something you really need to check because the last day to make any changes will be September 14th. Also, if you're going to be gone for the summer, let your ESD partners know who your summer contact is going to be in case we need to contact someone about your data. The data reported in this collection are going to be obviously fall term and spring term, but also summer term from 2017 summer. It begins the day after the spring term ends. That's how we classify summer. Those classes do need to be reported as well. Okay. So the purpose, and I like to share the purpose with everybody because otherwise why would you spend all this time working on this very complex data collection? But it's to link teachers and students to the courses that they're teaching or enrolled in. And then we use that data for the school and district report cards. We use it for the class size report, which is sent over to the legislators for them to look at. We use it for public information requests. And then we have some other federal and state reports that we use the information for. So I'm going to start with what's new. If you've never done this collection before, this might not make sense to you yet, so come back to this slide afterwards and look at it. But if you have done the collection before, this is where you need to focus. So I don't have this on this slide because it was just implemented this week, but we have some new changes. First of all, in the past, we've had requests that you guys want to be able to delete multiple records at a time. Our IT folks, our amazing IT folks got that together. So this year you will be able to delete multiple records at one time without having me to mass delete all of your records. You can delete them by IUID or by class period or classroom. And to do that, you use the class identifiers maintenance menu. If you're familiar with mass updating your classroom and class period fields, it's the same place, class identifiers maintenance. And that just allows you to type in what you're searching for and then click a little red delete button to delete all of the records associated with whatever search criteria you put in there. I'll show you a little bit later what that looks like, but I wanted to let you know that is going to be available this year, and I'm really excited about it. Another change that was implemented, if you've ever used web submission, there's a spot for SSID that allows you to type in an SSID that you can't find on the list. Maybe some other districts had already claimed that SSID, and so they're not showing up for you. You can type in the SSID. We have that same feature now for USIDs. So let's say you had a staff member who was with you, but they went to another district next year. You still need to submit their data for this year. but they're not in your USID collection anymore because someone else claimed them, you don't actually need to go back into the USID system and claim them again. You can just type it in their USID number into the little box and it'll add it. So that's pretty cool too. If your USID number is not active for the school year, you're still not going to be able to use that. It does need to be active. And we'll go over those rules later. And then I just want to cover what is on this slide, the additional guidance that we put into the manual, because other than those two things I just mentioned, there's nothing new to business rules or anything like that this year. But we did provide additional guidance on these things. So non-instructional courses are defined as non-core courses that do not have a curriculum. We've had questions every year about music, PE, art, those kind of classes. Are they included? And for departmentalized schools, typically high schools and some middle schools, those do need to be included. Those are considered instructional courses. So I just wanted to put that definition in there in the class roster manual to make sure you're all aware that for departmentalized schools, you do need to be submitting classes like music, PE, art, etc. Okay, we had a clarification for short-term substitutes because this happens every year. So if a teacher of record leaves and the remainder of the class is filled by short-term substitutes who don't meet the qualifications to be reported because they're not there long enough, then you can continue to report that teacher of record who left as the teacher of record for that entire class, even though the teacher is not currently teaching the class. However, if a long-term substitute comes in, then that long-term substitute would be reported. And we'll go over some of the sub-rules later. But as for the clarification, that's what would happen if you didn't have somebody to fill that spot. If the school year begins with a short-term substitute, so again, less than 20 consecutive workdays, then the permanent teacher returns. The permanent teacher would be reported as the starting of the first day of class, even though the substitute was teaching on that day. The third bullet on here, preventing spreadsheet software from converting data. So we've told you guys every year not to use things like the letter E or dashes in your field, because if you open it up in a spreadsheet software like Excel, it can automatically convert that data. Well, what we found is that it also happens if you have a string of 12 numeric digits, so like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 kind of a thing. That will also be converted into scientific notation. So if you are entering information into it, typically it's class period, classroom, or in the IUID collection, school section ID or school course ID. Those are the ones where we typically find this. And you're entering in just numbers. Make sure you use fewer than 12 numbers there. Otherwise, you could have that risk of it getting converted, which causes all sorts of problems. And then the last thing on here, tutorial course code 22005. There was a clarification in the IUID training this year, so I wanted to emphasize it that this is only used for special education tutorial courses. And then other than that, there's really nothing new with this collection. I'd encourage everyone to stay on to hear everything, even if you've done this for years, because inevitably there's going to be something that you probably hadn't heard in the past. But I did want to let you guys know that there isn't going to be anything new that we're going to talk about after this point. Okay. Do I have any questions of the stuff that I went over, the dates and some of those new things I was just talking about? Okay, I'm not seeing any, so I will move on. I did want to remind you guys, if you came in late, this is being recorded, and it will be posted probably within a week, the same place you went to log into this training on the video training website. And I would encourage you to watch what you've missed so far. I haven't been talking that long, so you haven't missed much. All right, so let's get on to who and what to submit. This is an attending-based collection, which means the school or district where the student attends is the one who needs to report the class. So let's start with courses. The type of courses that need to be submitted. If you're an elementary or self-contained K through 8 or pre-K through 8 school, you only need to report the homeroom classes. So don't report any of the breakout classes, like in this case, music, PE, Title I services, those kinds of things. Do not include courses lasting fewer than 10 days, and do not include pre-K courses. Now, elementary schools or the self-contained schools may report breakout classes if they wish, but they're not required to do so. And honestly, we don't look at the data, and it makes it a little bit more difficult for us to look at the data when you decide to submit the breakout classes. However, you can if you want. It's just if you are submitting your breakout classes, make sure you submit all of your breakout classes, not just some of them. All right, for departmentalized middle schools and high schools or elementary schools that do function as a departmentalized school, you do need to submit all of your instructional courses. Don't submit courses lasting fewer than 10 days. Don't submit things like study halls, student aids, or what we consider other non-instructional courses. And don't submit courses occurring at a community college or university that are taught by the college or university faculty. And for district level programs, the same pretty much goes for as the departmentalized rules. Students receiving tutorial, shared time, small group, etc., those kinds of things do need to be reported in this collection, and we'll cover what that looks like a little bit later. Okay, for the teachers that need to be submitted, they need to be reported if they've been teaching the class for 20 consecutive days. Now, for courses that last between those 10 to 19-day periods, you can still report the teacher even though they obviously haven't taught for 20 consecutive days. That's kind of the gray area rule right there. Okay, students must be reported if they've been enrolled in class for 10 days or more. Those periods shouldn't be adjusted to account for temporary absences. So if a student was sick a day, you don't unenroll them and put them back in again. But students who do withdraw, either they go to another school or they meet the 10-day drop rules, you will need to end date their class roster record and then put them back in if they came back. All right, we're going to go over some examples here. Mrs. Brown teaches kindergarten. Sally, Jose, and Tanya are in her class. Tanya only attends the first 9 days and then moves. So in this case, Tanya would not be reported because she wasn't enrolled for at least 10 days. Mr. Martinez teaches high school history and geography. He also teaches a 1-week Oregon history course over the summer. So of course the history and geography course would be reported, but the 1-week Oregon history class would not be reported because it's under 10 days. And then last, Mr. Lee teaches PE in the morning at his district's self-contained elementary school, and then teaches PE in the afternoon at his district's departmentalized middle and high schools. And in this case, you would report at both the middle and high schools. And this is optional to report at the elementary school because they were doing self-contained homerooms. So if the elementary school, again, chose to report this teacher as well, then that elementary school would need to report all of their breakout courses. Otherwise, just report them at the middle and high school. All right, next, we're going to go over some complex situations. And I'm going to go through this pretty fast. So if you are new and this isn't making sense, take time to maybe watch this again or go back to the PowerPoint afterwards and try to work your way through it. So I got a question here before we start. How about students attending LTCT sites that use computer-based software program for the vast majority of their classes? Some of these students take a unit that lasts for only 5 sessions. Some are 40 days. Do I report only the classes that are utilized for 10 days or more? So the classes at LTCT sites should be reported. Again, they need to meet the requirements, so only lasting 10 or more days, and those sorts of things. And it sounds like computer-based, so it looks like we're doing some sort of online reporting. So Todd, if you wanted to email me your exact situations that the students are doing at the LTCT sites, I can provide you some personalized guidance to how that's going to look. But in general, yes, the LTCT courses do need to be reported if you contract with those. All right, so the first situation we're going to go over is team teaching. And this is defined as both teachers teaching for the full duration of the class and having contact with students at the same time. It's not a teacher teaching in the morning and a different teacher teaching in the afternoon. So for team teaching, you would report both teachers and class roster. And I'm going to get out my little spotlight here so you can see what I'm seeing. So we have the same IUID listed, the 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we have student 1 right here and student 2 right here. And as you can see, the check digit staff ID, that's the US ID number. So teacher 456 is reported with both student 1 and student 2. And teacher 741 is reported with both student 1 and student 2. And sometimes I have a hard time getting my spotlight to go away when I want it to, so bear with me for a second. Wow, that was being really tricky today. Okay, well, there we go. So yeah, again, teacher 1 here for 456, teacher 2 for 741. And then down on the web submission screen, you can see we have Una Premier for the first teacher, Duo Secondaire for the second teacher. They are listed with the same start and end dates, same position code, and they're both on the same record there. All right, long-term substitutes. So a substitute that is assigned to the class for at least 20 consecutive school days must be reported as that teacher of record for that period that they were teaching. And then, of course, if the original teacher returns, that teacher would have another record. So in this example, you can see Orion Original from September 17th to October 17th. And then Orion left and Susie Substitute came in from October 17th until November 26th. And then the substitute left because the original teacher came back from November 26th until January 21st. And so you can see here, Orion Original has 2 records for this IUID, and Susie Substitute has the 1 record in the middle there. As a note, the 20 consecutive days refers to the days teaching, not the days employed. So we've had this situation before, but if a sub teaches only 2 days per week because the class is only offered 2 days a week, that teacher would only be reported after 10 full weeks of teaching to meet that 20 consecutive day requirement. So if it's less than that, the original teacher would just be reported instead. I got a question about the end date and the start date being the same for both. We'll go over the end date in a bit, but the end date needs to be the day after the last day of teaching. So in this case, because the end date on the first record is October 17th, that means that person left on October 16th. Okay, blended classrooms. So self-contained courses that have multiple grade levels being taught in the same classroom and are not secondary courses. We can't use this one for secondary courses. They use code 23012. Now, course codes changed from last year to this year. I'm sure you're all aware of it. If you submit to the IUID or staff assignment collection, you've noticed that. And so the code that we're using for blended classrooms this year is 23012. And in this case, the high grade should be the highest grade of content that is being taught, and the low grade should be the lowest grade of content that is being taught. So for example, a 4th-5th split in elementary school, you'd have 5 as the high grade and 4 as the low grade. Okay, packet curriculum. I'm not going to spend a lot of time getting into the detail of this because it can look different depending on how your school is doing this. But in the class roster manual, and I've gone ahead and put a link under your materials section, so you should be able to see a materials thing on your GoToTraining platform. And there is the class roster manual there. In that manual, there is an online and tutorial guidance section. It's about 3 or 4 pages long, and it goes over some of the specific scenarios that would apply to things like packet curriculum. But as a note, packet curriculum does need to be reported as long as it meets some of the other requirements. So if you're doing that, make sure to report it. Okay. Oh, can I define packet curriculum? So packet curriculum, what's the best way to define that? It's basically if packet work is given to a student in place of a course, not in conjunction with a course, but in place of a course, so they're actually receiving credit for it. That would be packet curriculum. Okay. And if you have questions about, well, my school is doing this particular thing, does that count? You can email it to me and I can let you know specifically if it does or doesn't. So for public and private online or alternative education, this is kind of a broad category, so let me just start with public. Public online school, in this case, the public online school or the district overseeing that school should be responsible for reporting the students. For a public alternative school, the alternative school or the district, again, overseeing that school should be responsible for reporting those students. For private online, it kind of depends on who is providing the instruction. So if the school is using a private online program, but the teachers are from the public school, then you need to report the class. If the teachers and all the instruction is provided by the private online school, and so the school doesn't even really, the public school doesn't really even oversee the instruction, then you do not need to report that in class roster. And for private but not online school, like colleges, for example, you do not need to report those. And again, these are all really complex situations that we've tried to fit you guys all into a mold, but we know you're all doing different things. So if you have specific questions, feel free to email me and I can help you determine if you need to report that and how that would look. All right, so we have some examples here. Pineapple School District contracts with Fruitopia, an online program that supplies curriculum but no teachers. Pineapple School District provides teachers to oversee this curriculum. In that case, you would report it in class roster. Celery School District, however, sends some of their students to VeggieU Online, an online college program where the students may earn both high school and college credit. In this case, they're going to a college online program that the school does not oversee, so you do not report that in class roster. Now again, more examples of this can be found in the online guidance of the class roster manual, so I advise you all to take a look at that if you have students doing these kinds of things. Okay, now we're going to go over the data elements. So if you are new to class roster reporting, this is where you really need to focus because this is going to be the base of what you need to know to submit your data. The collection uses information from the IUID collection, which is the Instructional Unit Identifier Collection, the USID collection, or the Unique Staff Identifier Collection, and the SSID collection, or the Secure Student Identifier Collection. Those are all other collections that we have. SSID is open all year, USID is open all year, and IUID is open almost all year. It's closed for a month in October. Otherwise, those are open, and that's how you guys get your ID numbers for courses, students, and staff. The fields in these collections that are using class roster must match what's already in that collection. So if you submit a student, some of that information for the student needs to match what's already been submitted in the SSID collection, and same for USID and IUID. So one thing to note, before you submit your data, all your SSIDs, USIDs, and IUIDs, well, your SSIDs and USIDs need to have been updated this school year, so sometime after July 1st, 2017. That's probably already been done because you've had things like ADM collections and staff assignment, staff position. So those should have already been updated, but if they're not, make sure they're updated. And then the IUID needs to be created this year. You can't use last year's IUID numbers. Again, those are probably already created because of the staff assignment collection, but if for some reason you're submitting something to class roster that doesn't meet the rules to be submitted for staff assignment, and that happens, then you'll need to make sure you have a new IUID for that this year. Okay, these are the IUID data elements. So they're the ones that we match to the IUID collection. The asterisk means it's required. Pretty much everything's required. The low and high grade aren't required except for the blended course code 23012. In that case, you do need to have a high and low grade field in your IUID collection and class roster. And as a note, whatever you submit in your IUID collection for these fields must match what you submit in class roster. So if you choose to list a low and high grade in IUID, you must also list that in your class roster record. Otherwise, you're going to get an error, and those are no fun. Okay, SSID data elements. So these are the ones that pull from the SSID records, and we match against those. In this case, unlike IUID, where everything has to match, in SSID, 3 out of the 5 demographic fields need to match. Otherwise, you're going to get an error. So if you're submitting a record for a student and their last name is hyphenated, but in the SSID system it's not hyphenated, if that's the only thing that's different, you're probably not going to get an error. But we do recommend that you complete the district local identifier and the student partial social security number, even though those are optional, to avoid getting that mismatch error, just in case there is something that is different, like that hyphenated name. And these are the USID data elements. Again, the same rule with the 3 out of 5 demographic fields needing to match. So we recommend that you put in an employer staff identifier and social security number, the last 4 digits if you have it, just to keep from errors triggering if the information doesn't match exactly on like a last name or something. Okay, now we're going to spend some time actually going over each class roster data element. If you want more information about the SSID, USID, or IUID data elements, there were trainings for most of those. The USID and SSID, I think, are old trainings, but I'm pretty sure we still have them on the video training site, so you can look at them. And then IUID was a training we had earlier this fall that you can check out as well, if you're responsible for submitting those as well. So as a note, the instructional minute count is an optional field in class roster. And I've had a lot of questions about this year because of the new requirements to staff assignment. And I wanted to let you guys know that instructional minute count for class roster is not the same as what's in the IUID collection, and it's not the same as what's in the staff assignment collection. This is an optional field. We don't use it here at the department. You can put information in there if you want to, but it would only be so you guys could see it yourselves. We don't look at it. So my advice, don't submit it unless you want that for yourselves, and it does not meet the same definition as what's in staff assignment or IUID. I also have a link here to the file layout. Why don't I show you that to you real quick, because I've got it here. It's taking a minute to load up. There we go. Okay, so this is kind of what the file, sorry, I've got a lot of stuff open here. This is what the file layout looks like, and you can find this online. But basically, we have a data map that shows you all of the columns, all of the fields that were required. There are a lot. But what I find handy in this file layout is that it has the code tables here. So you can see what codes we use for things and which ones were end dated, which is pretty handy. And then we have some business rules. So if you don't know why you're getting an error, you can maybe figure out why by looking at this. So that's what the file layout is. It's really great for your IT folks too. I have a question about the end date, and perfect timing because we're getting to that slide. So student start and end dates. The start date is the date the student began receiving instruction for the IUID, and the end date is the weekday following the last day of that student's enrollment in the class. If that last day of enrollment is a Friday, so then you'd use Monday as your end date, which I know gets a little confusing, but it's the same rules that IUID uses and the same rules that ADM uses. So if you're familiar with those end date business rules, this follows the same guidance. As a note, if you're putting students in through web submission, the IUID course and begin date, so what you've set for the actual course in IUID, will default to the student start and end dates. And so if the student wasn't there for the full class, then you'll need to change that by using the little pencil icon. Okay, Teacher start and end dates follow the same rules. So the start date is the date the teacher began administering instruction for that IUID. The end date is the weekday following the last day the teacher administered the instruction for the IUID. In the IUID collection, that's where you put the end date for the course. The end date for the IUID is not submitted in class roster, but it will also be the day following the last day of the course. Weekday following the last day of the course. Okay, classroom ID. And this one always confuses people. So I wanted to let you guys know that IUID, the IUID number, does not distinguish a specific class. We get class information from the classroom ID and class period ID fields. So I'm going to spend a lot of time talking about this just to make sure that we're all on the same page with it. So classroom ID, this identifies the room within the school that the class is located in. And you guys can determine how you want to label those rooms, but it's the room that the class is located in. So we've got some tricky situations. I mean, in a normal classroom, great, room 1A or room 100. Those are pretty easy to identify. But let's say you have multiple classes occurring in the same room at the same time, but they're actually different classes. In my example here, library 1, library 2, because you only have maybe one large space that you need to fit 2 classes in which case you just need to use a different ID. So like I said, library 1, library 2, or gym 1, gym 2, that kind of thing. For distance learning courses, like online courses, it's helpful if you guys use the phrase web only and then numbers. It makes it easy for us to identify that's an online class. You can use whatever you want as long as it distinguishes it as its own class, but web only is helpful for us. And then again, let's say you have several of them, so web only 1, web only 2, web only 3, etc. Now the class period. This must uniquely identify the period that the class is being taught in. So if you look at a high school, let's say they're in room 101 and it's period 1. That's pretty easy to identify, but we always have situations where it gets a little bit more complicated. So let's say you have an A and B schedule, which we come across a lot. The example I'm going to use here is you have 8 periods total, 4 in each day. You could identify them as something like period 1A, period 2A, period 3A, and then period 1B, 2B, 3B, etc. That would be a good way for us to distinguish, okay, this is an A day, this is a B day, and so they are different classes. If you list period just 1 for both the A day and the B day classes, we're going to think it's the same class, which probably is not true on an A and B day schedule. Self-contained or full day classes, so elementary school, you can use anything you want as long as you're consistent. So like full day, day, self-contained, whatever you want there. And then for distance learning, like online, you can also use the same kind of identifier you do for a self-contained, like day, full day, online, something like that. So here's where I'm going to sort of dig into the weeds, give you some real examples on how this looks. So course is defined as the subject, content, or curriculum taught in a class. That's what your IUID number is going to be, the course. The class is the same group of students and teachers learning one or more courses together. So let's look at example 1 here. Mrs. Stanley teaches Algebra 1 during first, second, and third period, and the students change each period, like you would see in a typical brick and mortar high school. So as you can see here, we have Algebra with 3 different IUID numbers because those are 3 different courses. We have class period 1, 2, and 3 all in the same classroom, 1A, because the teacher isn't moving, but the classes are changing, which is why we have the different periods. Now, since we have periods 1, 2, and 3, which gives us a distinct, different class period and classroom combination for those 3 classes, it's going to look like this is one course with 3 different IUID numbers, and it equals 3 different classes. Now, the reason why we have class period and classroom instead of just looking at IUID number is because of example 2 here. So Mr. Gomez teaches literature and writing during his first block period. The same students remain in his class during the whole block period. So he has literature and writing. Those are two different IUIDs because they're two different course codes, but they're in the same class. So if you use the same class period and classroom, in this example, 1 block and 2A, it's going to show to us that this is two different courses or two different IUIDs, but just one class. Okay, I'm going to just pause here so I can address a technical issue real quick. All right, as a note, if any of you lose sound during the presentation, I've heard of this happening before, just log out and back in again, and that should fix it. If not, you can contact our help desk and they can try to help you get back online, or just log off for the day and watch the recording in about a week. So hopefully that doesn't happen to too many of you. All right. So that was a lot of information about classroom, class period. I'm hoping you guys are all starting to understand it. If not, let me know. I can go over it again, or you can call me at a later time and I can walk you through it one-on-one. I do have some tips here. So again, you want to avoid things like dashes. Never use commas ever. We suggest that you don't use spaces because they are difficult to see. So if you have some sort of mismatch error, it's going to be difficult to see what doesn't match if it's the space that doesn't match. Don't try to use the letter E because that can be difficult, especially things that start with E, like E, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is not a good one to use. And then use less than 12 digits if you're only using numbers, because again, that can be converted into scientific notation. So, as a rule, only one classroom ID and class period ID can be used per IUID. So as you can see over here in the yellow that says allowed, we have IUID 104 and 880 in the gym during period 4. This is showing us that there are two different IUIDs being taught in the same class. Let's say you have a combined 9th and 10th grade gym class together. They have two different sets of content, which is why they have two different course codes and two different IUIDs. But it's one class, you're teaching them all together, it's got one teacher. So the classroom ID could be the same and the class period ID could be the same. Now what's not allowed is this messy example over here in blue. So 104 is being used for all IUID numbers here, but we have one taught in the gym, one taught in room 104. They're in different class periods. This would not be okay. In this blue example, you would need separate IUIDs for each of those situations. All right, now I'm going to go over a really long example before we move on to our next stuff. So at Clover Pass Elementary School, Miss Rose teaches 3rd grade in room 103. The class runs for the entire school year. The school year starts August 29th and ends June 1st. Melissa Frank was a 3rd grader in Miss Rose's class. Miss Rose was the teacher for the entire year. So I've broken this out into IUID fields, SSID fields, USID fields, and class roster specific fields. You can see all the IUID information is there. We have the IUID number, the district and school INS numbers, the school section number, school course number. That's all from IUID. Even the low and high grade are from IUID. The SSID fields, all from the SSID record. So that should all match what's in SSID for this student. The USID should all match what's in the USID for this staff member, except for position code, which is something you assign in the class roster collection specifically. Now, for the class roster specific fields, instructional minute count is left blank. Again, that's an optional field. The student start date is 8/29/2017. That's when the student started in the class. The student ended June 4th. Now here's an example of that end date on a Friday. So the class ended on June 1st, but that was a Friday. So the student end date, teacher end date, and then in the IUID collection, the course end date should be June 4th, which is the following Monday. The classroom ID and class period ID have been set here as well. So any other student in this class should have that same classroom and class period ID. I have a question here. is the IUID low and high grades only allowed for blended classes? It's not that they're only allowed, it's they're only required. So you can submit low and high grades for any of the courses you want in IUID. Just make sure you're also submitting them in class roster. The blended course code, that's the only one that requires a low and high grade, so you have to have it. Okay, here's another example. ODE High School has 9th grade and 10th grade PE in the gym at the same time, but these are separate classes with separate teachers meeting in different parts of the gym. We see this happen a lot because, of course, you guys don't usually have more than one gym, so sometimes the gym is divided up to have different classes. So you can see in blue here, we have IUID 5555 with the first teacher and 4 students, class period 6, and the classroom is listed as gym 1. Now, the IUID for the second course is 7777. Let's say this is 10th grade. We have the teachers, students. It's still during 6th period, but we're listing the classroom as gym 2. Now, because we have gym 1 and gym 2 here, that's going to show up on our end as 2 separate classes. If you had just listed gym for both of these, then we would show that these are both one class with 8 students in one class, which is probably not what you intended and can lead to some pretty high average class sizes. So make sure that these classrooms are different if indeed they are different classes. Okay, we're going to pause here for a question break. And while you guys are thinking up questions, I'm just going to cover real quickly what we just talked about in case you came in late. But these are the points that you really need to remember. So the collection period is from May 10th to July 2nd. It collects information on courses, teachers, and students. It pulls data from and compares data to the IUID, SSID, and USID collections. So you need to make sure that they've been updated this year and that your data match. I'll just wait a second to see if we have any questions before moving on. So I have a question about restating the answer to the LTCT question. So if your district runs an LTCT program, in general, those courses do need to be reported. But depending on how that looks, sometimes they're not, sometimes they are. So if you do have questions about how that runs, go ahead and email me and let me know your specific situation, and I'll let you know what that looks like, because there are cases where they are and where they aren't, just depending on what the instruction looks like and what type of an LTCT it is. There's a comment, I have high and low grades in all of my fields. Great, that just means you need to submit your high and low grades in all of the fields in class roster as well. Oh, I have a note that the FAQ section uses the old NCES codes for special cases. Is that in the current class roster manual? Oh, in the current staff assignment manual. Okay, I will let Leah know that so she can get that updated. Thank you for letting me know. Okay, moving on. If you have questions, feel free to keep typing them, but we're going to keep going. So next, we're going to look at the submission process. There are 2 ways to get your data to us. One is through a file upload, which is the most common for this collection because it has a lot of records. Even small schools have lots of records. So file upload is when all your information is in one file and you just upload it to us. Or web submission, where you can do record by record. So I'm going to put a poll in real quick here. If you guys could answer this. Here we go. I could just keep going through the PowerPoint and show you all the screenshots of everything, or I could break away from the PowerPoint and actually go on our testing environment. You can see what the actual application looks like. So if you wouldn't mind just sharing your opinion real quick so I can kind of see what I want to do with the rest of this training. All right, well, it looks like there are still quite a few who want to do the PowerPoint, but a majority want me to break away to look at the actual environment. So I'm going to go ahead and close the poll now, and we can go ahead and break away. If you have questions about the PowerPoint, we're going to come back to it at the end, but the actual application is kind of nice to see. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm just going to pause while I get out of here real quick. All right. You guys should all be able to see my screen now. If you can't, let me know. But this is the consolidated collections. So if you log into the district site, you're going to end up with applications here. And it's going to look different. It's not going to say ODE/ORR. It's going to say whatever you have access to. If you don't have access to this, contact your district security administrator to get access to it. And then go ahead and click on Consolidated Collections. If you hover your mouse over Staff Collections, you can go to Class Roster. And we're going to start with File Upload. So if you do Data Submission and File Upload, it brings you to this screen. What you want to do is click on the Browse button, and this will take you to like Windows Explorer where you can see all your files. Select the file you want to upload, click on the Upload button, and then wait. Class Roster is one of the slowest processing data collections we have because it is so large. So you might wait anywhere from like 5 minutes to 2 hours before everything's gone through, and that's normal. So make sure you allocate time for this. Don't submit it at 5 p.m. on the last day of the collection because it will take a while to process. Once it's been processed, then if you go over to Error Management, or at least once you click Browse, if you go over to Error Management, Review Queue, it'll show you, just so you know, this is our test environment. So you guys, if you're seeing your district, it doesn't mean you submitted. It means somebody here just used your district to submit a test file to see if it was working. But this is where you can see what file you have and if it's processed. You can see over here, it says percentage posted, percentage validated, all that kind of stuff. If you see something here that says an error or unable to post, then you can contact me or the help desk and figure out why that's happening. Review email. I don't have any at this time because I haven't submitted for this district, but when you submit, once you get an email back, you can get a copy of your email here. So let's say your email never came and you're wondering, well, maybe it got stopped by my junk mail filter. You can come here and see if the email was actually sent. Review errors is where you go to see your errors, and we'll get to what that looks like in a minute. But that's pretty much what you do for file upload. So I'm going to use web submission here, and that's again, if you go to data submission, web submission, to show you what it looks like to submit one record through web submission, and that can give you a better idea of what's required for the collection, even if you're going to be using file upload. This kind of gives you a better visual representation. So if you're in web submission, you can click on the drop down to select the course code. You're going to have more than just one showing up. Again, this is just the test environment that we have, so there's not a lot on here. You can search for a particular school or institution. You can search for the school course identifier, any of those things. But if, let's say you don't have a lot of courses, you're a very small self-contained elementary school or something, just click on search and everything you have will pop up. In my example here, I only have one. So it'll show you the IUID. You can click the green check mark for the IUID you want to submit. Then, this is the very, very, very important part because it often gets missed. There is classroom ID and class period ID up here. You need to submit something for that and make sure if you already have records submitted that it's the same one submitted for the IUID number. Otherwise, you're going to get an error. So I'm going to use classroom ID 100 and class period day, just for fun. All right, and then to put your teacher over there, you can use the filter buttons here. So if I wanted to say, I'm looking for this teacher, use the filter button, click contains, and it'll filter for that value that you put in. Or if the teacher's already here, you can drag them over and drop them in. You can also use this. This is the new enter USID field down here that I was showing you before. And that allows you to type in the USID number. Now let's say it's a USID number. Here, I'm just going to drag this back. Let's say it's a USID number that doesn't exist. If you click on add, it's going to say USID not found. So it needs to be one that exists and that has been active for this school year. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and drag this teacher back over, and you just literally drag and drop. One thing you need to do, this automatically shows up in edit mode. You can tell because there's a little blue check mark here. It's because you need to select a position code. Select a position code for what that staff member is actually doing for the course. Usually it's teacher, but sometimes it's different. And then adjust the dates if you need to adjust the dates. They default to the start date and end date for the IUID. And then click on the blue check mark. That's very important. If you don't click on the blue check mark, you're going to get an error. It won't go through. Okay, so now we have our teacher there. We can move down to student. And again, you can either type in the SSID number and click on add. You can filter if you have a very long list, or if you see your student, you can just drag them right over. Now, unlike the staff member, the student won't go into an edit mode because there's no position code to select, so it's automatically going to be good to go. If you need to change the start and end date for the students, though, you can click on the little pencil icon. Let's say the student was only here until, let's go back to September. Let's say the student was only there until the 28th. So we're going to use September 29th as the end date. They left and came back. So you can click on the blue check mark and then drag them over again and edit the dates. This case, let's say they were gone until November and then they came back to the end of the year. Click on the blue check mark to save that. So now we can see the teacher taught for the whole course. The student came for the first month, left for a month, and then came back for the end of the year. That's kind of what it would look like. And then if you click the Submit Class Roster for selected IUID, you should see the class roster successfully submitted. If you see anything in red, it means it didn't go through. So you're going to need to figure out why. It'll usually tell you why. It'll have in red the error that's there. Once it's gone through, if you really want to make sure it's gone through, you can do production download, and that's just under record management production download. Or you can just go to record maintenance, search for the IUID if you want, or you can just click on search to see what's been submitted, and it'll pop up here. Now we have two records showing because, again, that student had 2 start and end dates, so there would be 2 records for that course. All right, are there any questions about that part? All right, I'm not seeing any show up there. I did want to show you guys class identifiers maintenance real quick. So this one, again, if you type in the IUID number, 626715, or course code or classroom and class period and click on search, you can see the record here. Now, there is a delete button. So if I wanted to delete all the records associated with this, you click on the delete button. It'll give you this pop-up that says this will delete 2 class roster records, continue. If you click OK, it's going to delete both of those records. Those are all the records that are associated with that IUID number. You can also edit it, and this is where you can change the classroom and class period. Let's say, oops, I didn't want to do that. I wanted to make this class period 1. You can update it, and it'll show you how many records have been updated. All right, I do have a question. When students leave mid-year, do you also put the next week date as the end date? So yeah, whenever a student leaves, regardless of whether it's at the end of the year or in the middle of the year, you use the following weekday as the end date for the student, or for the teacher for that matter. Okay, so I am going to go back to the presentation now so we can cover the rest of the materials. Give me a minute just to switch things up here. All right, and I'm going to fast forward. Okay, so we're going to next talk about correcting your data. So I'm just moving things around here. There we go. Okay, so data in your error queue are not part of your submitted data. They must be fixed or deleted, and I'm going to emphasize that because if you submit records and they get stuck in your error queue, we don't put them into your final data. It's not part of your final data. We can show that you have records in error, and you're probably going to get an email or a phone call from us saying you have records in error. So they need to be fixed, or if you didn't want them in your data, they do need to be deleted. So how do you know if you have errors? There's a few different ways. First of all, remember how I said when we were going through the web submission, it should say class roster submitted in green, and if you get anything in red, it's bad. So here's a screenshot at the bottom left here that says class roster submission has failed. See the errors below. If you get that doing web submission, you have errors. Fix them. And these won't always transfer over to your review errors menu if you're using web submission. So make sure you address the errors that you have right there in web submission. If you submit a file upload and it has errors, on the right-hand side here, you'll see the email. You should get something that shows you how many records went through and how many had errors. In the example here, it says 4 records with 8 pending errors. That means there were 4 records that were submitted. They all errored out, and they created even more errors than the number of records that you have, which happens a lot. So once you have something that notifies you you have errors, you can see what they are by going to review or error management, review errors. In this screenshot, you'll see there are 3 errors associated with that first error type and 8 errors associated with that second error type. All right, so once you're in review errors, you can click the little green check mark to open up the error record and see exactly what's going on. So in this example, it says USID matches, but any 3 of these things must also match. And you can kind of see down here where it says error value, it says 6408, which is the USID number. And then in parentheses, MF, and another parentheses, Smith, Smith, Doe. So if you click on the little green check mark, you'll see the class roster details screen. And down in red in the bottom, it'll kind of show you what that error is and what doesn't match. So you can see that for this staff member, which the staff member section is in the middle, male was submitted, but female is on the USID record. And Smith was submitted, but Smith Doe was on the USID record. And so that's what's not matching. So there's a couple things you can do to fix this kind of error. One, if your class roster information is incorrect, just change it here and click on Save. If your USID information is incorrect, you can change it in the USID collection, come back here, and then save the record, and it should go through. Okay. You can also use download errors to fix your errors. So if you have a lot of errors, what you can do is go to Error Management, Download Errors. You'll get an email with a spreadsheet of all of your errors. It doesn't tell you what the error is. It's actually a spreadsheet of the error records, and then you can, or the records that are in error, and then you can change the information there and actually re-upload it to us to fix them. So when you do this, what you're going to want to do is download your errors first, save your downloaded error file that you get in your email. When you open it up, make sure that Excel hasn't converted any of your data, for example, into scientific notation, because that happens a lot in this process. Then, and if it does, fix it and save it. Or if you're not sure how to fix it, you can give me a call and I can walk you through that process too. But anyway, the errors that you have there, go ahead and fix them in the spreadsheet software, however you have it opened up, save it. Then go to your housekeeping and delete your error file. And that's right here under Error Management, Housekeeping. You would delete your error file and then you can upload that that fixed error file to us. It's very important that you wait until your housekeeping has been deleted. So maybe wait 5 minutes after you click the delete housekeeping record before you upload the new file to us. If you upload the new file and then delete housekeeping in that order, you're going to get all sorts of errors that we can't really ever fix. So make sure you do the right order there. All right, if you need to update records one at a time, you can go to Record Management, Record Maintenance, and do that. If you have records that went through, so they didn't produce an error, but they are wrong and you need to fix them, you can do a production download and resubmit it with the correct information as long as you're not changing any of the key fields. And I have the key fields here in orange. So a key field is what tells us that it's a unique record, and as long as those fields stay the same, it's just going to overwrite the information. But if you change any one of the key fields, our system is going to think it's a whole new record and create a whole new record for it. So if you're not familiar with doing this process, maybe give me or your regional EFD partner a call before you do it. Make sure you're doing it correctly, because it can get a little complicated. A good example of why you might want to use a production download to update your information, let's say your teacher USID number is correct, but the teacher last name is wrong. So for example, it says Smith Doe instead of Smith. You can pull a production download, remove all the records that aren't that teacher, just to make it easier to look at, and then update the last name for the teacher and resubmit it. Because teacher last name is not a key field, it will just overwrite that information for all of that teacher's records. Okay. So if you need to update the classroom ID and class period ID, I showed you a little bit what class identifiers maintenance looks like in order to do that. Definitely use that option if you can. You can also use a file upload to edit it. If you only have one record associated with that classroom or class period, you can do it through record maintenance, but that is rare that you only have one record using a specific classroom and class period that you need to change. These are just how you do the class identifiers maintenance, which I already showed you guys. Okay, these are some of the common errors, and I wanted to just quickly go over what they are and how to fix them. So USID matches a staff record that has not been updated since last July 1st. In order to fix this, you would need to go back to your USID collection, search for the staff member under Record Management, Record Maintenance, verify that the information there is correct, update it if you need to, and click on Save. Then you can go back to your error and class roster and simply save it, and it should go through. The next common one that we get is Instructional Unit Identifier. That's the IUID number. Matches an IUID record, but the demographics, all those ones listed there, must also match. If that's the case, you need to figure out what is wrong. Is your class roster IUID information wrong, or was it submitted wrong in the IUID collection? You may have to actually go to your IUID collection to see what was submitted there to see what doesn't match. Once you know what isn't right, either your class roster or your IUID. If your IUID information is incorrect, then you'll need to create a whole new IUID record with the correct info, and then it'll assign you a new IUID number and put that in all of your class roster records for that IUID. If the class roster record is incorrect, then you can just change the information there to what it is in the IUID collection. And then the last common error that we have here, the combination of classroom and class period must be the same for all instances of a specific IUID per collection year. So that's just saying you submitted one IUID and it has multiple classrooms or class periods, so they don't match. So what you can do is to go into record management, record maintenance, and search for that IUID to see what was already submitted for it, or check your file upload, or the one that you uploaded, to see if there's multiple classrooms or class periods used for a particular IUID. It could trigger from either of those. Once you know what's already been posted or what is the correct one, then you can determine what needs to be changed, if it's something you can use class identifiers maintenance for, or if it's something you need to do a file upload for. You just kind of have to figure out what's wrong first in order to figure out how to fix it. It may also result in creating a new IUID if, for example, you have one IUID using two different classrooms and class period combinations. You really need two IUIDs for that. Then in that case, you'd have to create a whole new IUID. So I know that probably sounds kind of complicated. If you get these errors, you can call me or your regional ESD partner, but let's say you procrastinated and it's 5 o'clock and no one's answering their phone because I get off at 4. And then I have posted something called the Class Roster Errors Manual. You'll see it in your materials here for this training, but it's also posted on the video training website. Not the video training website, the Class Roster Resources website, or the Class Roster Schedule of Due Dates page. It's on both. And I'll show you those resources at the end as well. But the Errors Manual is new. It's not something you want to read through because it's very long and kind of boring. But if you have an error and you don't know how to fix it, that'll kind of show you how to look through it and determine what the problem is, how to fix it, and how to prevent it in the future if you seem to be getting a lot of those kinds of errors. Okay, so I'm going to take another quick question break. If you have any, go ahead and type them in. And while you're typing, just wanted to give you these reminders of what we already covered. So data can be submitted via web submission or file upload, or you can do both. Errors are not included in the submitted data, so you do need to fix your errors or delete them if you don't want them to be part of your data. And then use record maintenance to fix errors one at a time, and class identifiers maintenance to mass update classroom ID and class period. And I am happy, your regional ESD partners are happy to walk you through that process if it does get a little bit confusing. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions, so I'm going to keep going. We're going to quickly cover audits. I'm not going to go into depth about that because there will be an actual audit training for you, and that will be on July 5th. So the audit review period is July 12th through July 20th, and audits open around 1 o'clock. So if you come in over the summer on July 12th just for this, don't come in until after 1 o'clock. As a note, there's no second round audits. So if you're familiar with your ESD partner sending you a spreadsheet for some of our other data collections for audits, this collection does not do that. So it's very important to have your data submitted during that original window before July 2nd. Otherwise, your data is not going to be audited and it could be incorrect. All right, I have a question here. A history teacher teaches U.S. History Semester 1, and that ends on January 11th. So we'll note ending January 12th, and the next semester starts January 16th. So that's, yeah, just another question about end dates. I don't have my calendar in front of me to see if that's a weekend, but let's assume it's not. If it ends on January 11th and January 12th is not a Saturday or Sunday, then yes, you would use January 12th. Okay, back to audits. So to get to them, and again, these won't show up until the audit review period. You go to Class Roster, Error Management, Review Audits, and then you can see the audits displayed there. It'll give you a little bit of information, but if you click on the green check mark, it'll give you more. They are listed by staff member. So it can be a little confusing because we have staff, courses, and students. These are listed by the staff member. So often the class roster audits affect more than one record. If it only affects one, it's going to be like this top example here, and you just need to either confirm it or fix it. If it affects more than one record, it's going to tell you that. For example, this combination was used on 113 records. If that's the case, if it's correct, you just confirm it. If it's not correct, you need to change all 113 of those records. Okay. I've mentioned the word confirm here. Confirming just means you believe the data that were originally submitted are correct. It doesn't mean you think the audit's correct. Confirm means you believe the data's correct and it doesn't need any changes. That can happen with audits because, again, audits are not errors. They're just interesting information that we think might be incorrect, so you need to look at it. So if you click on the confirm button, it just confirms it. If you click on the confirm button accidentally and you didn't mean to, you can email me. You can also email Robin Stalcup. She's the one who does our class roster audits, and we can figure out how to get that audit displayed for you again. Oh, another thing confirming does is it makes that audit record disappear from your web interface, so you're not going to see it anymore. Don't simply click confirm because you don't want to see your audits anymore. Only click confirm if the information is correct or you've already corrected it elsewhere, and so that's why you don't want to see it. And again, if the audit only affects one record, you can change it directly in the audit review window or the menu. But if it affects more than one record, you'll need to change that using file upload or record maintenance. Here's just a quick example of using record maintenance to update your information. The example is classroom ID 414 and class period ID 3MTWRF. At that school was reported with 58 students, which seems high, and it was used on 113 records. So here, if you're using record maintenance and you click on search, it will show you all 113 of those records, so you can at least see what they are. Okay, just a quick review about audits. The audit review period is July 12th through July 20th. Most audits apply to more than one record, so you're going to need to fix all of the records associated with it. And confirming means that the information originally submitted was correct. Just as an announcement for you guys, Robin Stalcup will be doing our class size and audits training on July 5th. I don't know how many of you are going to be here on July 5th or if you're going to be taking that day off, but if you're here, watch the training. If you're not here, that training will be recorded and you can watch it a little bit later once it's posted. That will go over the class size validation, so basically what this information is used for, and then the audits as well. It'll give you a more detailed look at the audits. Okay, last I'm just going to give you some resources and then we'll be good to go. So here are all of the URLs for different pages you might need: the class roster schedule of due dates, IUID schedule of due dates, USID, system details, basically schedule of due dates, same with SSID. And that can give you all the information you ever wanted to know about these collections that we have. The class roster manual can also be found on the class roster schedule of due dates or the class roster resources page, and I have that linked in your materials here. The training, this is the URL for the video training that hopefully most of you went to get to this training today. Class roster will be posted in about a week. The SSID training is at the top of the page. The IUID training was presented on October 6th, if you need to watch that. And then again, the class size training will be on July 5th. Here are some contacts. And if you printed out your PowerPoint today or the PowerPoint notes, I apologize, there was a last-minute change on this, so it's not going to be on the posted version. So take out your pencils and write it down real quick. The IUID contact is no longer Leah Thorpe. She got a promotion. She's still able to answer some questions, but we're moving this on to a new staff member, Caitlin McRae, who started. So write down Caitlin's information if you have questions about IUID. Here's her contact information. I'll leave this up just for a second so you guys can jot it down. And if you can't remember, you can probably still email Leah and she can forward you on. Also on here for contact information, I have myself. Feel free to contact me. You can contact Robin Stalcup about the class size validation. So I listed, or even the audits if you want to. So I put her information here. And then the SSID, USID technical issues, I want you guys to contact the ODE Help Desk. And thank you, Karen. I see your chat there about ESD partners can answer IUID questions as well. That's a great link into your information. I have it right here. So Karen, Peter, and Rhonda are great resources for this information. So if you have questions about class roster, and I guess here as well IUID questions, please contact them. They're sometimes a little bit easier to get a hold of them than I am. So use them. They're great resources, very knowledgeable, and definitely know what they're doing there. Okay, just wanted to say thank you guys for coming and for listening to me talk for over an hour. If you have any questions, you can type them in now and I can get to them, or you can email me, but you're free to leave right now if you want. I'll stick around for just a couple minutes to answer questions. And again, thank you for watching. Thank you for all the hard work you do for getting the data to us. We do appreciate it, and we do use your data. We're not just ignoring it. So your hard work is being used. Thank you.